and he was a very clever man too, and
What was he
he
like?
he knew her Errol Garner. He knew a lot of stuff. You can talk cooking. You can talk about cars. You can talk. He knew a lot of different stuff. He was very clever and he was very curious.
I saw him interviewed once, actually, on the old Mike Douglas show in the States, and he mentioned that he had never had a cup of coffee. He said he had never, it just had never occurred to him to drink coffee, and for some
Yeah,
reason he didn't want to do it. And I thought that was funny. I mean, Hank Jones told me once too. We were talking
yeah.
about one of the reasons he didn't join Charlie Parker and that kind of thing, and he preferred to stay at CBS and play in the orchestra and then play gigs at night in New York. He had never smoked a cigarette, had a drink
No.
of alcohol,
Oh
smoked a
no.
joint, or done anything.
I
And
have story for you. I have a story for you with
well,
Hank Jones.
my thing with Hank, I said that's amazing. I said that's very curious. He said, well, I had a good reason for that. I say, why? He said, well, I'm such an extreme person that had I even begun to do those things, I would have been the worst of everybody.
So the first tour that I did with him, oh, that was a long time ago. And I went to his room. I asked him for something. And, in every room that he went, the first thing that he took his luggage, one of his luggage, he opened one of his luggage and he took, one of his stuff. How can you say that? So, and he
Right.
was he was he was under the bed, on the bed. He was everywhere. He was. Oh man, he had all this stuff. You know, yeah, he had over 6, 7 different stuff that for the bed. That was another one. For the toilet, that was another one. He was like that. He was
Well,
like
they talk about obsessive compulsive disorder these days, OCD, and I was thinking
yeah,
a lot about that because one of my daughters, my middle daughter, my 17-year-old, has sort of been diagnosed with this OCD. She'll spend a lot of time trying to get something right, and she's late to
yeah,
school because of it. And I was thinking about that, and I said, well, a lot of the very brilliant people I've known had a kind of OCD. I mean, that was certainly if you
yeah,
saw Hank doing that, and I know he was like that with all that detail. But then you
yeah,
see that same thing that would spray that stuff with room freshener everywhere was the kind of thing that would enable him when practicing to go over the same minute detail 200 times until he was happy with it. And I
yeah,
think you need a little kind of OCD because I may have a little OCD too, that I can
yeah.
practice for hours one thing just to get it to where I think it's right. And maybe you have to be a little crazy for that. But you know, I mean,
And with Hank, you couldn't tell the dirty names. He didn't like that.
oh, he
Uh,
didn't he didn't like it.
he accepted those names when it came from Swedes or a very few others. But with coming with me, or he didn't accept. He said, no, no, you don't say that. You use this word. Do this. Say that. You know, uh, you know. I
Yeah,
think
I never heard him
the
use
only
the motherfucker
musician.
word or anything like that. No, he just didn't speak like that.
No, he didn't speak like. I have. There is another guy. You thought he was like that, but he was not really like that. That was John Lewis, because with John Lewis you can talk dirty jokes and dirty words. He loved them, you know. He
Uh-huh.
loved them. But with Hank Jones, no. The only guy that I heard, I knew, and I was there. That was Sweets, of course, because Sweets told some jokes so funny, that was so funny, and that was so, in a
Body.
way, so immigrant, that we accept that. We can accept that.
Yeah, but Hank, I didn't hear him even saying things like, even something like shit or something. I never heard him say anything like that. he never
No.
he had that churchiness to him, you know, that he was did that kind of thing. But he was, you know, he was very funny, and
Oh yeah.
he,
He was very funny. Very, very, very funny. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But you know, and now you also, Benny Carter was another person, though
Oh yeah.
he you could talk a little body with, but you know, but still you wanted to be proper with him. He always exuded so much, you know, these old school gentlemen. They
Yeah.
were, you know, like there was just this feeling of he had such a dignity to you know, to everything that he did. I mean, I saw him one time in Chet Baker and I went to hear him in Belgium one night at a place called Paul's in Brussels.
Okay.
And
Brussels. I know this place. Yeah.
yeah, you know, and Benny had lived in France for a while, of course, in those days earlier with Coleman Hawkins and Bill Coleman and the early first people to really check out Europe. He was among the first to go over there for a little while in the 30s, I think.
That's
So,
right.
so Benny spoke a fairly adequate French. You
That's
know,
right.
yeah, so there was a guy there, and he's sitting there, and he says to him in French, he says, vous jouez souvent dans Belgique? Do you play often in Belgium? He says, oui, you know, quelquefois, sometimes I do, yes. And he said, well, j'ai une boîte proche d'ici, and I have a club pretty close to here, dans une autre ville, in another town. And est-ce que vous pouvez jouer là, peut-être, la prochaine fois? Maybe you could play here the next time you're in Belgium at my club.
Mm-hmm.
And oui, c'est possible. Then he raises his eyebrow, that thing a little, oui, c'est possible. And the guy says, well, how much are they? He said, oh, Benny says, well, we have to discuss the money. You know, il faut que nous discutons l'argent, les choses. L'argent. And the guy says, well, oui, c'est combien vous êtes payé ici? How much are you paid here?
Yeah.
And Benny does the most beautiful take. He raises that eyebrow, which I can't do, but he looks at the guy and says, c'est mon affaire. No, that's my business. No. You know, and just, I think they did make a deal, you know, but the guy understood right away. That was a lesson.
Yeah.
That's what these guys would teach you. Like when Count Basie said that thing about life.
That's right.
You know, when you were around these people, you just watched them to see how they, you know, I learned a lot about playing the saxophone that night, listening to Benny play. But then I learned that too. Which is,
You know, and
you know,
with what was crazy, as I can say, crazy with those old guys, when when you call them to ask them to do a gig or a tour, you know, uh, they gave you a yes. You didn't have any paper written down. They said yes, that was yes. They said no, that was no. They had no problem. They gave you their words. They say, I'm gonna do it, and I had no problems. I think most with the old guys, Sweets and all those people, I think I never did any contract, because that was their words. They said yes, that was yes, and there was no problem. Uh, when younger musician came along, even today, this is very complicated. Everything is very complicated, and with those guys, that was clear. That was yes, I'm doing it. How much money? Okay, good. See you. That was all. That was easy.
yeah, that was, they came from those times, and people lived by their word. And
That's right.
though I'll tell you, though, these guys, when they dealt with music business people, for the most part, they
Yeah,
really did everything. They made sure they had it down on paper, because they all, at one point or in life, or another in life, had been royally shafted by somebody in the music business. You
that's
know,
right.
so
That,
I think they just took one time, and that was it. But now, so Benny, was
yeah, I met, Benny invited I remember the first trip in LA, the first people that I went to, that was Benny's. And that was supposed to be Ray or Sweets, but for some reasons they were not there. So Benny said no. And Benny was very happy because, he thought I'm going to go to Ray's or Sweets. But so he said, hey, I am the first to invite you. So he invited me at his home, and it was very nice. And I was young those days, and
you went
I
there, you got
wanted to,
there.
yeah, I got there, and you know, I wanted to go out and to go some discotheque and find some people and talk and see, when you're young. And he told me one thing. He said, Beethoven, I have something to tell you. Don't go to the Hollywood Boulevard at night. This is one of the worstest place to go. This is very dangerous. And he says, when you go at night in LA, you have to have some changes in your pocket in
Some
case
change.
of change, in case of people ask you some money, because if some people they ask you some money and you don't have, you be in trouble. So this is the only thing that I took from him. The rest of it, I didn't care. I said, he's old, he's there for many years. So I was naive. So that was the second night. I said, okay, I'm going to go down. And so where I went to the Hollywood Boulevard, it was 8 o'clock in the evening. And, that was very strange. And, there was, the night was there. And, I parked my car somewhere and I went to the street, and I saw two guys coming, from on my direction. And the more I walked, the more I saw them, and the more I say, they don't look that good. So those guys, there was big guys. And I was, in the street, and those guys, suddenly they went just nearby me, and one of the guys said, do you have some change? And I said, yeah. So I was like this. So yeah. So I gave the change. And when they left, I stayed about 1 minute, and when they left, I went back home to Benny's. And Benny said, oh, I thought we were supposed to come back at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I was like that. And he said, what's up? And I said, man, I apologize. And he said, for what? I said, I didn't listen what you told me last night. And he said, what happened? I explained him that. And he said, see, the old guys, I was born before you. I know what's happened. I'm living in LA since 1944. So, but I was naive.
Uh-huh.
But he was nice. He was great, and his wife, and and we talked, and he was a very good piano player, man. He could play
Oh,
the
of course.
piano.
Well, to write like that, you have to be. I mean,
you
it's
know and and he was showing me, as I knew about music, he showed me a lot of his stuff. And he showed me, I remember he showed me a Japanese suite. So he wrote a suite that never been played, or I don't know what's happened,
a
because he
sweet.
said a suite, yeah, a
Yeah,
suite.
yeah.
And he wrote that. He said, oh, I'm just doing this. And I was reading this music. I said, man, this is fantastic. So I didn't know what's happened with this suite, but that was fantastic. This guy, and he could compose and write music without any instrument, any piano. He was there. He took his paper and he wrote, and that was exactly what he wrote.
Yeah, it was second nature
He
to you.
was yeah, he was supposed to be one of the guys who almost never did any mistake about writing music. He was exception,
Yeah,
exception.
he could write it down, and he was a great trumpet player, and nobody ever
Oh,
wrote better for saxophones than Benny, too. I mean,
that,
you
oh
know,
yeah.
he invited me to his house too. Unfortunately, I don't drive, and
Okay.
LA, wherever I was in LA, he was at the polar opposite end of town, and I had gigs, and we never found the right time for me to visit, which was I was kind of sad about. Though I did have a very nice experience with him on the telephone one day. I was talking to my friend Brooks Kerr.
Yeah.
Brooks was a fine piano player, and he was very good friends with all of those older cats. We were the same age, Brooks and I, but uh,
Mhm.
you'd think Brooks was 95 years old the way he knew everybody like that. And he was, Duke Ellington did say, if you want to know about my band, you should ask Brooks Kerr because he's our encyclopedia. Brooks said, I used to call him Rain Man because he knew all these facts about everything. But one time we were on the phone, and Willie the Lion Smith used to be Brooks's teacher. And I would come home after school. I would go to visit Brooks. He was quite wealthy, and I was not. But I would go visit and hang out with Brooks and practice together. And so I'd come home, and Willie the Lion would be in the kitchen, and then he'd go give Brooks a lesson. But I would go down to the basement and practice, and Willie would hear me practice, and he always would say, "Young Benny Carter," he called me, which I thought I was more like maybe young Charlie Parker, not just Charlie Parker, but I was definitely playing more like that. But he said no. He said those things you're practicing, which was true. It was the close A exercises and the basic things. I used to hear Benny Carter, Marcel Mule exercises, all that's the classical stuff. He said, oh, Benny Carter used to practice all that. But anyway, one day we're on the phone, and I was talking about how I had met Benny in Europe a little bit, and Brooks said, well, why don't we call him? He loved three-way conversations. Brooks was blind, and most of his life was the telephone. So I said, wow, I'd love to talk to him. So we call Benny, and Benny says, oh, mover. He said, I said, well, we did meet briefly. He said, yes, but I know you aside from that. I said, really? He said, yes, I have a record of yours. I'm trying to remember, but you played this beautiful alto ballad. In fact, I like it very much. It's a favorite of mine. I'll think of it in a second. And he was like in his 80s, and I'm thinking like he's going to think of it. And he said, yes, I think I know what it was. Did you record a song called We'll Be Together Again? I said, yeah, I did. He said, that's a very beautiful rendition of that song. I said, I was high for years on that. And, and so then we became friends. I would call him maybe, 2 or 3 times a year just to speak to him for a few minutes and ask him questions. And one time I asked him, do you get out to go and listen to music much, anymore? Do you still go out sometimes? He said, yes, I do. I go out sometimes, and I catch some things. And I said, what do you think? Anything you? He says, well, there's very many good musicians around. He said, but a lot of the younger people I hear, it's sort of like it all sort of sounds a bit the same. And he didn't want to put anybody down. He said, but I know, I told him. I said, I heard how that came up was I told him I'd been listening to the Chocolate Dandies, which I had just sort of discovered. I was in my I think my 50s. And I said, I sort of knew them, but I didn't really know how modern that was for its time. I mean, how, and he said, yes. He said, a lot of the music now might sound the same. He said, well, I don't know how modern it is really, but I know that when we made this music, we would listen to it afterwards and we'd say, well, ain't never heard nothing like that before.
That's
And
right.
he said,
Yep.
and I wonder how many people say that now.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I have another short story about Stéphane Grappelli, which I knew very well. I remember one day we were in, I don't know where we were. There was, I think, maybe in France, and this journalist came to ask him a couple of questions, and this journalist said to him, "What do you think about free jazz?" He says, and Stéphane said, "To me, jazz has always have been free."
Yeah.
you know. So I love that too. I was on the floor. Everybody was cracking up.
There's a
Yeah,
great Zoot
yeah.
Sims Hal Cohn story about that too. One time, Zoot was at the bar at one of the places, the Five Spot or something, and there was a very, very avant-garde group playing, and they were carrying on and playing this very aggressive, loud kind of music, and Zoot was sitting there, kind of making faces like this, and Al said to Zoot, he said, "Don't worry, Zoot, it's not as bad as it sounds."
I love it. Oh man, yeah,
So,
I love it. Yeah, yeah.
so you've known, so many cats. I mean, I
Oh, there is one guy I love, and I was at his home just before he died. That was Gerald Wilson, the great composer and
Joe
arranger. He
Wilson.
was a great friend of mine. Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yes.
I never knew
Oh
him
yeah.
because I was on the East Coast and he was always on the West Coast. What
That's
what
right.
was he like? He wrote some beautiful music. I mean,
Woo!
what kind of guy was he? What was he like?
He was he was very outgoing. He was always he was short. He was always talking, and he was always you know the first time I went to his home, his basement, he was playing the piano, and suddenly he was standing up and he said, "Wah, wah, wah." He was singing all his arrangements, by heart. I was, you know, I should have, a tape recorder and an iPhone to film it, because he was like this, but he knew a lot of stuff too,
He was just by
very
himself.
open, very open. You know what he did most of the time? He said, he said, I called him many times and I said, "What did you do today?" He said, "I put myself in troubles." And I said, "What troubles?" He said, "I put a piece of paper and I wrote three notes, even any notes, and with those three notes, I should I should write a theme and I should do an arrangement." And he said, "Sometimes, man, I put myself in big troubles." That's how he was every day, So every day he was doing something new.
He wrote three notes down and then made something from it.
That's right. So how many musicians did that or does that
Kind of a
at at
brilliant
at,
idea.
at past 90? Because he died and he was 96 or 97 years old. Can you believe it?
Yeah, he lived a long time too, like Benny did.
That's
And
right.
now,
Yeah.
Lalo Schifrin. You mentioned him, and that
Oh,
he had presented you to the Cologne Symphony Orchestra. Now, for those who
that's
don't know Lalo Schifrin, he first came to prominence. He was from Argentina, I believe, and
that's
he
right.
came to prominence as a piano player in Dizzy Gillespie's quintet um, in the late 50s, early 60s, somewhere. I'm not so good with chronology, but
That's right.
he's mostly known by the general public as the person who created the Mission Impossible theme. He did the
That's
music
right.
for that, and he did a bunch of film scores and did that. He was a tremendous arranger, and I actually, as great an arranger as he was, I missed his jazz presence because he didn't really come back to jazz, as I know, very very often once he becomes successful as a film composer, film and TV.
Well, but he came back to jazz in the beginning of the 90s when he decided to do his presentations and his arrangements called the Jazz Meet the Symphony.
I didn't know that. Yeah,
Oh man, he's the only guy on this planet until today who could mix jazz and classical and to be real in jazz, real in classical. Man, and he recorded 9 albums, and we did a lot of tours in Europe, and
really.
oh yeah. So
Did
we
you have to
had,
do with the production of those?
I did concerts for him. I did organize concerts for him. And I have a story that I'm going to tell you. This is part of it. So he mixed, he did just for that. So we had a symphony, and we have a jazz trio, and sometimes we had horn players as a guest. So the main thing was Lalo composing, arranging, directing, Ray on bass, Grady Tate on drums, and we had Paquito de Rivera, John Faddis, James Morrison, who could play all the stuff,
Right, from Australia.
and he wrote, and Lalo wrote some fabulous suites, Fats Water, Bix Beiderbecke, Thelonious Monk, Dizzy Gillespie, Ravel, mixing Ravel and jazz, Bach. He mixed all the stuff, and it's fabulous. And you, I'm I'm gonna talk to you after the show. You have to have some of those stuff, because this is exceptional. He's the only guy who could bring these two word, words together great, because he knows everything in jazz, and he knows everything in classical.
Well, it was
Being
something
on top of that,
attempted
a
several
great,
times.
yeah,
Several
great film
people had
composer.
attempts at it, that third stream thing with, John Lewis and Gunther Schuller and that
Yeah,
type of thing. And
but he's the only guy who can make a symphony orchestra swing. This is
well,
the only guy.
that would be something to hear.
Yeah, yeah. So I have two stories about Lalo. Lalo speaks 5 or 6 different languages. He knows everything about music. He knows everything about sculpture, architectures. We went to Cologne, and we saw church, and he said this church has been made in this century. It comes from Greece. It comes. This guy knows everything. Everything. This guy, and he can arrange everything. This is a genius. This man is just fabulous, fabulous,
Is
and
he still
very,
with us?
very, very cool.
Is Lalo still alive?
Yeah, I talked to him. I talked to him 3 weeks ago. He's 92 years old. He's old now, but he still has his mind.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And I have true stories for you. That was one of this stuff that we did. We did a lot with the WDR, the Cologne
Right.
Orchestra and big
Very
band,
good
and
German big band. Yes.
yeah, symphony. So we did. That was one of those concerts. So at Cologne, the regular thing was 4 days rehearsals and 2 days concerts. And the first rehearsal start on early in the Monday morning at 9. So I was very early for the musicians.
I can imagine.
So yeah, so I was from Lausanne to Cologne. That's about 7 hours by train, but I took the night train. So I arrived there. I took the night train. I arrived there at 6:37. Went to the hotel, and for that day I arrived a little bit late. It was not 9 but 10, and they were rehearsing and all that stuff. And I was in the audience, but nearby the band, and was sitting there. And suddenly he turned and he saw me arriving. So, after 30 minutes, he said, "Okay, let's have a break." He said, "But before I want to present to you something special. Somebody special, not somebody very special, and somebody who has a lot to do with classical music." And I was looking at him, and I was saying, "What is he gonna say now? What is he gonna say now?" And I was looking at Grady Tate, who was laughing on the floor. Ray was on the floor. I said, "What is gonna say?" And he said to the people, to the Philharmonic Orchestra, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, here is Beethoven there."
Beethoven,
And
there you are.
he's the direct descendant of the very famous Beethoven. So everybody was applauding. He said, "Wow!"
That's funny.
And I said to myself, "What? What?" So suddenly I saw all the orchestra coming to me and say, "Hey, Mr. Beethoven, you are the real descendant of Mr. Beethoven." And I couldn't. I said, "What I will say? I had nothing to say." And I was, man, I was swearing. I said, "Oh man, man." And the three guys and John Faddis and Morrison, James Morrison, they were on the floor. And they asked me many things, you know. I said, "Oh, can you tell us about Beethoven and what he did and what so and so?" And I said to them, "Okay, I don't have the time. I will tell you later on." So I said, "Okay, out, you know." And so after that, the five jazz musicians, they were there, and I said to Lalo, I said, "You MF." And you know what he said? He said, "We got them."
We got them. Yeah, we got
Yeah.
them. So
Oh man, I
it
was so
makes
and
me
I was
think though that even though he had no children, there must be some Beethovens somewhere with his cousins, or somebody must have
yeah.
procreated. I had never
So
thought of that.
yeah, so
But,
everybody thought, you know, everybody.
I mean,
He said,
certainly
"We
there are
got
Bachs.
them."
We know that there's got to be a lot of Bachs related to
Yeah,
that, the way he procreated. You know, I'm sure that the children had children of children of children.
that's
But
right.
Beethoven, I've actually
We don't
never
know.
heard his name again except referring to you.
That's right. So everybody knew that. Everybody thought that it, I said to Lalo, I said, "You," and he was laughing. All the musicians, the jazz, Ray was on the floor, Grady was everybody. And I remember I was the tour before we went to the Berlin, the Berlin Symphony Orchestra, and we did the same show. And we did a rehearsal about Round Midnight, because you arranged Round Midnight with the strings, with the
Oh,
symphony, and that was a great arrangement. And he played the piano, and suddenly he couldn't remember a part of the bridge, and he stopped, and the band stopped, and suddenly, and that was the rehearsal just before the concert, so he was very well, dressed, right? And suddenly he started up the piano and he went under the piano. He went under the piano, and everybody looked at him. Red, Grady, everybody, and all the musicians, they were looking, and especially the classical musicians, they saw Lalo Schifrin going under the piano, and he was, and suddenly the big chief of the Philharmonic Orchestra went to see him down under the piano and said, Maestro, what's going on? What is wrong? And he said, "I lost the key of Round Midnight, so I just tried to find the keys."
Find the key.
Ha! Oh man, yeah.
Funny, that's,
We
well,
we we
lay
were
low,
we were
lay
on
low,
the
laid
floor.
low. He laid low
Yeah.
for that one.
Oh man, that's
But
Lalo Schifrin. Oh yeah, yeah.
and you had an
So,
experience with the Philip Morris Super Band. Now, was that
oh,
Clyde Hampton, Johnny Griffin, or Joe Henderson? Who was on that band when you toured with them in 1990? Were you like the
that that
road
was
manager for that? Is that what you were doing
that
on?
was that was a big band. That was the 2 years before. 2 years before this tour, the Philip Morris, um, the big chief in those days, the big chief of the Philip Morris used to live nearby my apartment downstairs, and his name was Aleardo Buzzi, and he was the big chief of the Philip Morris, and he was a huge jazz fan,
By the way,
and he
Philip
came to
Morris, for those who don't know, was a
yeah.
cigarette company because I don't even know if they exist anymore, but a lot of people don't smoke now. So Philip Morris, and they would sponsor jazz. Um,
Yeah.
their theme song was "You Leave Me Breathless." No, I'm just kidding, but
And this and because he was a huge jazz fan, they decided, because of him, they decided to sponsor some jazz tours with some, let's say, stars. And one of the first stuff was started with the Gene Harris All Stars Big Band. That
right,
was the 1988, and Ray did that. Ray put the band together.
Ray Brown.
Ray Brown, and But I said to him, I said, why you are not the leader? He said, no, I organize. The leader is somebody else. So Gene Harris was the leader. He was not a Gene Harris was a great, to me, he was the best jazz pianist playing the blues. Gene Harris. He
Yeah.
was one of the top, but he was not a leader, but he was a great pianist and a very sweet guy. So that was the first tour, and it was a huge, huge success. So they decided to do a second tour, and but the second tour that was more commercial. That was still the Gene Harris All Star, but that was planned to have Joe Cocker and BB King. And Joe Cocker canceled, and they asked for Ray Charles. So you had for a couple of songs the band, and then you had BB King for a show, and then Ray Charles for a show. And of course, Ray put that together again.
Ray
And that
Brown.
was my beginning, Ray Brown, and that was we worked with Ray since 2 years when it happened. And he called me one day and he said, listen, he said, there is a guy who is responsible to be the responsible of the European tour for the show. But he said he can't do that for 2 or 3 days. Can you do it? I said, sure. Can you be I can be responsible of the band, of everything. So I said, sure, no problem. So you had the BB King, Ray Charles, Sweet Edison, Kenny Burrell, Garris Million was there, Howard Jones, Paul
Who did you say right
Foley.
before? Oh, who did you say before Harold Jones?
Yeah, Howard Jones, a drummer. Yeah.
Right, I know Harold, but who did you say before him?
Oh, Kenny Burrell, Frank West, Sweets, Johnny Cole, fabulous band, all stars, big band. James Moody, all those guys. So he asked me, Ray Brown, he said, can you do it? I said, well, sure. So he said, okay, we arrived in Zurich, on Monday at 10, and we arrive in Geneva at 12. So be there at 12. So I arrived at 12, and, I was looking around. There was no people, nobody. And suddenly I heard a voice all across the airport, Beethoven! And I looked at, and I was Ray, and he was far like there, and he was screaming, and he was, So I said, what's up? I said, you late. I said, you told me about 12. No, that was 11. So the whole band and BB King, they were waiting for Beethoven for an hour. Can you believe it? The whole band of BB King,
really?
they were waiting for me. Yeah, yeah. And Ray told me, he said, man, we are waiting for you.
Not a good.
You fucked up. You fucked up. The first day you first fucked up. I said, I'm sorry. We misunderstood. So he said, there is a bus. He said, go on the bus first. And the first guy who I saw was Sweets Edison. And Sweets told me some nasty stuff. He said, you motherfucker, you fucked up again. You ain't shit. I'm gonna kick your big Swiss ass, motherfucker. So all the band was on the floor, Everybody was, so at the end, everybody loved me. I knew almost all the musicians, but, they were upset because they were waiting. And soon as Sweets told something, everybody was relaxed. Everybody was in good mood,
By the way, that is a picture behind. You see the picture behind Beethoven of someone with a trumpet, and that has very distinctively Harry Sweets Edison.
And right? Lister and Prez, yeah.
Is that Prez? Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's that Laughing to Keep from Crying date, or one of those. Yeah. And
yeah.
So you have I couldn't see that far, but you could always tell. Like Prez had his pork pie hat And Sweets had
Yeah,
that type of hat, the kind of a straw hat that he often wore,
yeah,
like that.
yeah. So
And
so so everybody was so my mistake was totally forgotten. And musicians they say, "Oh, Beethoven, you man," yeah. But that was good, and that's how I got to know BB King, because you see, I didn't talk any goddamn word in 2 or 3 days with Ray Charles. He never traveled with the band.
I was wondering
He
about
traveled,
that.
he had a limousine. He had 6 different people all around him. You couldn't approach him. You couldn't say hello, and he didn't talk to the musician. The 3 days I was there, that he had no relation with the musicians. BB King was all the time with us, all the times.
Uh,
Very nice. We talk a lot, and BB King played with the band. After every tune, he said to the public, he said, let's have a big applause for this great band and these great musicians. Every time, Ray Charles didn't say any goddamn word about this band,
Ray
But
was not known for
BB
his
King was a
charm.
great guy. Love BB King. Love. He has a, you know, very deep person, and he used to. I remember I went to his room many times because we talk about many things, and he always had 2 or 3 books that he read every day. And I asked him, like Ray Brown has always 2 books. Every night before to go to bed, he had 2 books to read. And I asked Ray and I asked Bibi, I said, why do you have you guys 2 or 3 different books? And they said, it keeps your mind open and to reflect and say, oh, I read that in this book. I read that in that book. So it keeps your mind open and still
Well, before the days
yeah.
of telephone,
That's
phone apps and all that, I used to read 2 or 3 books sometimes at the same time. I'd be reading Tolstoy, and then I would also be reading a biography of somebody. You know what I mean? And then it was like changing channels. Just I'm
yeah.
going to watch this for a while, read a couple chapters of that, and then go to your biography of James Dean or something. And then come back to
Yeah.
So I think that was these cats could be very eccentric. I have a story apropos to nothing, but I think you'd enjoy this. When I was a road manager, told me this story too, because you guys get to see aspects of people that sometimes the musicians don't. When you're traveling in that capacity. Like I don't know if you know Maurice Cohen. He worked for Alberto Alberti in Italy. He would be somebody
Okay.
that would go on the road with the bands and do that
Okay.
type of thing. Road manage us. So one of the things that he used to do miles and all these kind of things. But he told me Fats Domino. He had Fats Domino on tour, and he
Okay.
said, Fats took him all through Italy. He never ate any Italian food and he never drank any wine. I said, really? What did
Oh
he do?
yeah.
They said, well,
Yeah.
every hotel he stayed at, he has his recipe for fried chicken, and he wanted Miller beer. So in advance, he
Oh,
said he had to carry cases of Miller beer to put in the refrigerator of every hotel he stayed at that before he came, so it would be cold. And the chef had to have the recipe for his fried chicken. And
yeah.
basically, that was what he ate during a 3-week tour of Italy. Would eat eggs for breakfast or something. He had other things, but I remember he told me that was it. That was what he wanted, and that was what they did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we've had a great time, and
This thing that I wanted to tell you that uh you know so if I'm doing this, if I was first of all, I was a jazz fan. I knew most of those guys, but doing jazz fan. And suddenly one day, Ray came with that stuff, and Ray, can I tell the story?
sure.
Okay, so, Ray. Ray Brown was a very special man. He was, of course, one of the greatest musicians of all time,
Oh
but
yeah.
he was a great manager because he was doing a lot of managing. He had an agency, and he was very special in many ways because even with his close friend, he didn't like to stay at their homes. So he never slept at Mill Jackson home, never stayed at Dizzy Gillespie home. He always went to an hotel room. He didn't want to stay at people's home, except in me. I don't know. One day he came to Lausanne and I said, okay. He came and we stayed, and he was a great cook. Man, he could cook.
Oh,
His father was a cook, you know.
I see.
So he stayed and I said, did you reserve a hotel room? He said, well, no. And I said, we have to call and to do a reservation. And he said to me, can I stay at your home? I said, what? Ray Brown asking me if he can stay at my home? In other words, Bill Jackson, Oscar Peterson, all those guys, he never went to those guys. And why he stayed at my home, I don't know. So the next, he said, I want to stay 3 or 4 days. I stay every time anytime. So the second day we talk, we have a breakfast, and he talked to me. He said, listen, he said, I'm getting old. I'm tired to do business and contracts and problems of transportation and all that stuff. He said, we need a guy who not only knows this music, but loves this music and knows us. And I said, okay. I said, oh, there is plenty guys all around the world. I said, you will find somebody very, very quickly, and that was easy. That will be easy for you to find somebody. And he said, I found somebody, I know. And I said, who? And he said, you. And I said, me? He said, yeah. But I said, Ray, I don't know anything about business. I don't know anything about, I'm a jazz fan. I love you guys and I am around you. But he said, okay. He said, if you want, I can help you. Because in those days, I was working in a bank, and I was not happy. I was working in a bank, and suddenly he got up. He went to my bedroom where he stayed, and he arrived with this big book, and he put this big book on the table. And I said, "What is this?" He said, "This is my book." And I said, "Your book for what?" He said, "This is my business book." He said, "That's yours." Can you believe it? Thousands of musicians and managers and promoters wanted to see that book, and I didn't ask for anything, and suddenly said, "That's yours." So on this book you had Herbert von Karajan, Carlo Maria Giulini, Isaac Perman, all the guys from every type of style,
The Encyclopedia Britannica of address books.
Yeah.
Ray Brown's address book would be absolutely precious, and I think it would need its own phone booth.
Yeah. You wanted to call Ella. Okay, I know all those guys, but you said I want to call Ella Fitzgerald. Okay, you have it. I want to call.
He was married to her, so that would.
Yeah, but everybody who is from the street say, "Oh, I want to call." Everybody was in this book. Can you believe it? Classical music, rock people. Clint Eastwood, everybody, I had this book in front of mine. I said, what? So sooner or later, I got some calls from, all the guys that I knew. They said, oh, we heard that Ray asked you to arrange stuff for him and manage him. So we want you to be our manager too. J.J. Jones, everybody called me, So I didn't do any phone calls. They call me because of
That's
Ray.
funny, because I had wondered how you got into that. Because when we met in Israel, you were there with Ray, but there were also other people you were representing, and And it was funny because you really didn't seem like your music manager type. You know, that's what I liked about you. That, you know,
Yeah,
we would end up hanging out, and I said, wow, this guy doesn't seem like your cigar smoking agent, you know what I mean? And this type of thing.
yeah.
So that was funny. And but you made sure I got my money, which was very, thank you. I
Oh
don't
man.
know exactly how you did that, but you know, made sure Ray got paid, and while you were there, you made sure I got paid. That was very nice because and
Oh,
Francis, you know, but
that was a nightmare. Can you believe? And you remember that when we went. I remember we were on tour with two. That was the we were on tour with two bassists. That was Pierre Boussaguet and Ray and the piano player Jackie Terrasson. Remember Jackie? You
right,
know.
who was Francis was touting Jackie at the time. Francis was very,
Yeah, that was
big on
the beginning
Jackie.
of
Marvelous piano
Jackie.
player. Yeah, terrific
Oh
piano.
yeah, oh yeah, great pianist, great guy.
Yeah,
And we finishing a tour, and we were in Paris, and we were supposed to take a plane. So we took the plane from Paris to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. No, Jerusalem, I think. And that was we were supposed to have our plane ticket reserved. We had no reservation and paid. No reservation, no paid. So I paid for it, and I said to Ray, I said, I don't like that. This is a very strange stuff. The thing I'm gonna do is right away I'm gonna do to the organizer and say, hey, you promise us, we sign a contract, you didn't respect that. So okay for the first thing, but nothing else. So this guy said, yeah, I'm gonna pay him. And I smelled that something was wrong. And remember, you know, I think two bassists played the second night, and you played the first night, the night after. You know, I
right
think
after the Charlie Parker tribute.
that's right.
I had done
So
master class and played with the Israeli guys concert with
that's
their
right.
big band one night.
Yeah. So I said to Ray, Ray said to me, he said, you know, you'll be over of this, you know, because I think Ray trusts me, and he saw that I smelled something wrong, you know, so he didn't say anything,
Yeah,
which
your instincts
you
were
know.
good. You know, one of the nicest
So
things. Go ahead.
yeah, and so the second night that we two bass was the first group to start, but that was, you remember, that was on the beach, and that was huge because there was 8,000 people there, and that was sold out, you know. And I think the first group was two bass, and the second group was a tribute to Miles with Wayne Shorter, Wallace Rooney, Herbie Hancock,
And it was
Ron
the
Carter, and Tony
VSOP,
Williams.
sort of the VSOP
That
band.
that's
It was called
right.
VSOP, but it was a different group. Freddie was there too, but he wasn't with them. He was with Dizzy's big band.
That's right. That's
And
right. You know,
and
and so as I know that that was sold out. That was 45 minutes before we went on stage. They went on stage, and I said to the guy, I said, I want to have my money now. And he says, well, I'm going to pay you after the show. I said, no. And I said, I want to have the money for the plane ticket. I want to have the money for the show tonight. If not, I'm going to go on stage and I'm going to explain to the 8,000 people the way that you treat the musicians.
mhm.
He disappeared. 30 minutes after, I got the money.
Yeah, well,
And I told him, and I said, man, we do the same for tomorrow night. I don't want to have the money now, but I want to have the money just before when we go on stage. And I want to have the money for the whole group. Ray Brown is there. I don't care. I want to have for Philip and for Bob, for everybody. Everybody's gonna go on stage who is around me. I want you to pay me.
that's how it happened.
That's
Because
how it happened.
I remember
And he
the next
gave me
day. people were saying these guys left town, man, and all these guys were complaining like they were like stranded on, man, they didn't pay us and blah blah blah, and it was like really Dizzy's big band, because Dizzy didn't make it because he was sick. Remember,
That's right.
so the band played without Diz,
That's
and
right.
it was his United Nations band. Paquito and
Yeah.
those guys were there, and Moody and Freddie Hubbard and all that.
Slide Hampton was there,
Yeah,
and Jimmy Heath was there too.
Heath was
Yeah.
there, and
Yeah.
Dizzy's manager was there, Larry.
Fishman.
Larry Fishman, yes, he was there. But I wanted to say one of the best experiences I've had in music was preparing for that concert with Ray
Yeah.
and Walter Bishop and Philippe. The rehearsal we had in the afternoon was as memorable as I've ever had. We went through Dancing in the Dark and My Old Flame, and most of the other two, like, we kind of knew. We didn't really plan anything, but just hearing these two guys talk about all the ways that you could harmonically and arrangement-wise, play these two tunes was like a year of music conservatory for me. Even though I was already in my late 40s, I was like learning so much from that little rehearsal in the afternoon. Those guys showed me a lot rehearsing those tunes. And Beethoven, I think we've got a lot. We've had a wonderful time. It's been a real pleasure, and
Oh, me too,
to have you
man.
here. Your job these days in Switzerland, you're involved with a kind of social work, right? Is that
Yeah. Now for 6 years, I'm doing social, the stuff. So I'm helping people who has no more income, you know. So in Switzerland, we don't let people to go on the street. We pay for small apartments or for small studios. We pay for eating. We don't let people out in the street. And I'm working with social people because I'm into that, and helping young people, old people. I help I help them to not to be out of the to be
and
not
it's a small
in the
enough
street.
country where you don't have the overflow that you might have in other places. And of course, there's that famous Swiss joke that I think I told you. I'll tell it one more time. That
Yeah.
because there's really, I mean, I remember that there was when I was there 20 years ago or so, the unemployment rate in Zurich was something like 0.02 something. There was almost nobody was unemployed except disabled people, but everybody had some kind of job. So a guy turns to somebody in the street in Switzerland. He says, "Excuse me, sir, but I haven't eaten for 3 days." And the Swiss fellow says, "My good man, force yourself." And
I like that. Yeah.
but no, I
But
mean, everywhere there are
we,
people in need of assistance, and Jean-Michel is someone, Beethoven is somebody who helps them with that.
this is that's another way to do things. But I did for many years concerts, produce CDs, DVDs, so and so that. But everything I did, that was for the people, for the audience, and
Yes, and
now
you've
this.
also worked very closely. I should mention you produced around 100 CDs with Jordi.
Oh yeah, Fresh Sound. Oh yeah. Jordi
From
Snyder. Yeah.
Fresh Sound Records, which is located in Spain, but which
Yeah,
has
great guy.
Jordi Sunyo.
Yeah,
Yes.
fantastic guy, great guy, honest, and this guy knows what we talk about. He knows this music, man.
Yeah, he's another one that really does
Oh
love music.
yeah.
Anyway, at
Yeah.
this point, we're gonna wrap it up, and it was a real educational and fun experience to talk today with.
Oh, I have a last story for you.
One more story is always welcome.
Yeah, So I talked to you about this great, Pierre Boussaguet,
Well, I know Pierre. We could just say
Pierre,
Pierre. The last several years, actually, of Michel Legrand's life, Pierre was on the road with him.
yeah, and
Last
Lalo,
time I was in
because
Paris, actually, I brought Joe Cohn and Steve Williams into the Sunset about 10, 12 years ago, and I had Pierre on bass.
oh yeah, so and he was, when Ray left Lalo Schifrin, because Ray at the end, Ray said, I love this music, but it's too much to read. So Ray took Pierre took Ray's place, so he was the bass player of Lalo for 10 years too.
Mm.
So I have a story about Pierre, and so Pierre Boussaguet, that was about 40 years ago. He he did his first Japanese tour with Monty Alexander. Monty Alexander on the piano, and I think that was Bobby Thomas on drums and Pierre on bass. And for that tour in Japan, Sweets Edison was a special guest. And Sweets arrived maybe 1 hour before the show started, And so Sweets went to see all the musicians, and he went to Pierre and said, Miss, who are you? I am Pierre Boussaguet. I am the bass player. So nice to meet you. So they went on stage, and suddenly, Sweets love to play this tune, I Wish I Knew. It's based on shiny stockings,
Oh no, I wish I
So,
knew me. Wait a minute. I wish I knew someone like you could love me. That I wish I knew. No, that's an old
yeah,
standard. That came from a Dick Haymes movie.
that's right. And he used to play that, but it's based on the shiny stockings chords,
It isn't. No, it is not. No,
shiny
it's not.
stockings. Yeah.
Shiny Stockings is not based on I Wish I Knew. Shiny
Okay,
Stockings
so
extends in whole steps, and I Wish I Knew doesn't do that.
I'm sorry. So because Sweets plays it on he plays I Wish I Knew, and he plays shiny stockings with it.
Well, you could play a
So
medley. I mean, that's interesting that he plays them as counterpoint at the same time.
yeah, but no problem. No problem. So I think this is the same chord changes. But anyway, no,
Oh,
that's
it is,
not the thing.
but it's the second eight. You can do it the first eight, but when
Yeah.
it's like ba 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 da 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 da, did I mistake this for a real romance? I wish I knew. You might
Yeah.
be able to get away with it anyway, but he does it that
I,
way anyway. Oh,
yeah. So anyway, so he went to see he went to Pierre and he said, this tune, he said, do you know I Wish I Knew? And Pierre said, yes. He said, okay, just you and I, no, just a duet. So they play I Wish I Knew, and at the end, people they applaud, and he went to see Pierre and he said, I, can you tell me your name again? And he said, my name is Pierre Boussaguet. And he said, what? And he said, Pierre Boussaguet. And there was a lot of people applaud and so. And he said, okay, I don't understand. You French, right? Yes. And he went on the microphone and he said, ladies and gentlemen, on bass, coming from France, Charles de Gaulle.
And that's how he became that.
Man. So and that's the same. Since that, all the musicians they don't tell Pierre Boussaguet. They said Charles de Gaulle. Man. Well, a lot of stories like this. That's great. Great, man. I love you.
Yeah, man, it was. It's been a lot of fun, and you know, I'll see. We talk anyway, and it's been a real pleasure to have Beethoven, also a.k.a. as they say, Jean-Michel
Yeah. Yeah.
Reisser, on as our guest today. And
Thank you. Thank you for having invited me, because I think you are the first guy that's my first interview I did thousands of interviews, but that's for the first time I am on the other way. You know, this is
With the
the first
subject.
time I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was a pleasure to interview you,
Thank
and
you.
we'll talk soon. I want to thank Jesse Kaiser for uh,
Yeah.
putting it all together for us.
Jesse, love you, top, great, love you.
And you know, we thank you again. We thank you all for watching. And
Yeah.
if you would care to subscribe, you can subscribe to us at Bob Mover Jazz Ability
Yeah.
and .com, right?
Yeah, Bob, I want to tell you the last thing that thank you so much for your great playing. You're a fantastic fantastic artist, great guy. You top, we love you, and what you do for jazz is exceptional. Exceptional. What you do is fabulous, and we love you. We thank you so much.
Thank you. And we love what you do for jazz as well. So
Yeah.
goodbye, everybody, and God
Goodbye.
bless you. And thanks again to our man Beethoven.
Thank you very much. Keep swinging, and don't forget the blues.
That's what he likes to say, and I think can't
Yeah.
agree with that. Keep swinging and don't forget the blues, and don't forget the changes.